All right, guys, let's talk trolling. So the first thing a lot of people that are new to trolling will ask is, why should I troll? You know, maybe you troll when you're having a sandwich or you're having a bad day. The reason to troll is not to just drag baits along. It's to deliver bait at a specified depth accurately in a recreatable process. So that takes a little bit of science and a little bit of gear. So we're going to look at all the elements that it's going to take to get you set up for trolling success. That's the rods, the reels, some of the big lures in musky fishing, as well as some brake lines, some structure stuff to get you set on the right path. So the first thing up is rods. I rely on the Musky Shop Shield Rod. This is the Trolling Series rod. This is the 8-footer. We have some different links at the shop as far as rods, but this is just the specified 8-foot trolling rod. It's a great all-around trolling rod. It's got a nice soft tip, so you can always see even the smaller baits working, but you can work your big baits like your headlocks, your big jakes, pull anything behind this, and it's gonna hold up. It's meant to take the abuse of trolling, so that repeated action on the end of this rod, that's what it's built for. Got this rod wrapped at the shop. You can get that done as a custom feature if you want to wrap your rods. This rod is built to take the abuses of tick and click and banging rocks that sometimes happen. Maybe you don't want to put your casting rods through that. You don't necessarily have to have a specified trolling rod if you're maybe in a single rod state or something of that nature. But it's nice if you're able to troll 2, 3, maybe even more rods than that, to have some specified setups for trolling rods that are available. The one thing that is sort of hand in glove with trolling is line counter reels. Now, a lot of people go, why do I have to have a line counter? You don't. But the nature of trolling is doing something and making it repeatable. So let's say that I'm trolling at 3.5 miles an hour with a headlock and I have 25 feet of line out, and that becomes a magic number. With line counters, you're able to do that consistently. So line counter reels are going to be the best way for you to get consistent results in your trolling. I recommend it, even if you're in a single rod state like Wisconsin, or an area, I should say, you can only troll a single rod. Having a line counter on hand is very good, so you can repeat that same thing. We hook up with a fish off of a crib, we're on 10, 15, 20 feet of water, and we have to have X amount of line. Having that line counter is going to take the guesswork out of that, so you know your boat's speed off of your graph, and you know the amount of line you had out, so you can get that result one after another after another. I like the Kuma reels, but we have options from Dial, and a lot of manufacturers make a great line counter reel, but making it a repeatable process is the benefit there. Now, do you have to have one? Not necessarily. There's some other tricks I'll talk about here for a second that you can get around. So if you're in a single rod state, let's say you have an 8'6" rod, you can pull line down that rod and sort of mark that off, and you know you can get a repeatable result within a margin of error there, just pulling the line down the rod. How much leader do I have? And sort of doing the quick math there. The old school method of watching how many spool turns you have as that line goes out. You can keep an eye there, or just simply marking, say, 35, 45 feet on your line with a magic marker before you start your day. That's some ways that you can get going before you want to get into a trolling reel. But if you're going to take it serious, you've got to have a line counter reel to make sure that you're getting repeatable results day in, day out, and really just dialing in. And that's the joys of trolling, is once you know that muskies are holding at, say, 10 feet, and they're off the 12-foot break, they're 2 feet off of it, you can go all day long and have that bait right where it needs to be just by doing the small investment of the line counter. You know, but your casting reels, a lot of them have a big loud clicker right there. That's going to be enough to get you going in the game. So one thing that comes up quite often when the conversation of trolling, do I need a specified leader? Personally, I think that a fluorocarbon leader, the longer the better, is going to be your best option when trolling. So having a barrel swivel so that bait can have the best action, and a longer leader, because these fish, a lot of times, if we're doing 2.5, 3.5, 4 miles an hour, even higher at times, having that fluorocarbon as a little bit of a shock absorber is a good thing to have, especially if you're, like I said, big baits, big speed. I recommend the Musky Shop fluorocarbon leaders. They're a great quality leader at a budget price that have a nice big swivel on there. You can go down to the 18s and 24s and things of that nature. Personally, I like running, we even have a 40-inch leader at the Musky Shop. That gives that fish a little bit more shock absorption, and it'll sort of keep that abrasive line off them if they happen to roll in the line while trolling. So having the right leader is somewhat important. Now, if you're in a casting scenario and you're just going to troll for a little bit, You can troll with the straight wire leader. You can troll with any leader that you have on a casting setup. Just have your drag set a little bit soft and be prepared for that. But that's just part of that setup. I recommend a swivel in that in a trolling leader so that you have a little bit of give and a little bit more action in that bait. It doesn't get more exciting than some of these giant trolling baits. I'm looking at a couple 10-inch headlocks here. Big baits, big fish. They're gonna put something in your net. You can't go wrong with a bait like a headlock when we're talking about some of the lures you need to be successful in trolling. These are trolling machines. You have 3 different options here for some different depth settings. And if you're looking for depth settings for your trolling lures or what kind of speed, what kind of line you need, the Musky 360 has that. That Musky 360 app has trolling charts for a lot of the most popular baits that are on the market, especially like these headlocks. You can make a slight augmentation of this bait by just changing the place of this pin. It's going to radically change its running depth. But the reason in trolling, if you want to get into trolling, running some of these big baits is the amount of action they have. This headlock, you get this thing up to 3 miles an hour, 4 miles an hour. It has just a vicious side-to-side action and a ton of wander. So that's one of the magic things you're looking for in a great trolling bait. That bait is not going to necessarily track in a straight fashion. It's going to have some side-to-side wander while you're moving forward with your bow. But we'll get into that here in a second because that's sort of the magic of trolling and how you trigger more strikes. But baits like headlocks and, its sister bait here, the matlock, a little bit thicker profile bait, wanders a little bit better at lower speeds. And you go, well, what speed do I troll at? What do I do? We'll get into that in a second, like I said. But these baits have some of that initial wander that you don't have to ask for. These are going to do a lot of that themselves. They're going to do a lot of work for you. So this is why this has become such a popular trolling bait. It puts fish in the boat, and it's got a lot of that action that you don't need to import. Another thing when people are asking, what are some of these top trolling baits? What are baits that you got to have? We get into the Grammels, just such a classic here. This thing is a old warrior that I have here. You can tell this bait is beat up and been run, but these Grammels, it's a slightly tighter wobble. It's a bait that doesn't have as fat of a wobble, but it's got a nice tight run that really pulls some fish up. And these big Grammels, it's hard to cast a bait like this. If you want to encounter a big fish, if you want to do that cold water trolling, if you want to troll in the late part of the year, you're going to want a big bait. But you don't want to cast this thing all day long. It's like ripping a bulldog times 10. So you want to be dragging this behind the boat. These big Grammels have that wonderful action you're looking for. But then we get to some of the classic stuff. Down to this guy. I would say a jointed depth raider, a straight depth raider's put more muskies in the boat than just about anything. You don't have to troll big the entire time. So there's plenty of options out here of these mid-sized baits. So throughout the course of the year, the same thing with your seasonality with your casting baits. We're going to start small and we're going to go big. So adding some things to your trolling game, all the way down to the Lungin 22 short up to the 13-inch Grammels, you're going to need those in your trolling setup. But it comes down to seasonality as when those are going to be the best baits to throw. So as we start off early in the year, we want to have our small baits on. We want to troll rattle traps. We want to troll small blades. The rule of thumb is this. What's a trolling bait? What's not a trolling bait? They're all trolling baits. It all depends on application. But having a good assortment of trolling baits to start with, baits that are specified for trolling, like your matlocks, your headlocks, your big Grammels, and some jointed DERs, depth raiders, some straight depth raiders. Maybe those 22 shorts, those 22 longs are going to be a great way to start off for trolling success. All right, guys, so we talked about some of the basics here of some of the gear and some of the setup you're going to need for trolling success. The one thing I'll say is this. You can grab any bait off this wall, on my whole shop here. You can troll it for days on end at any speed you want, but if you're nowhere near a muskie, you're not going to have trolling success. You need to be dialed in on where they're at, where they're going to be, where there should be, whatever that might be. You need to dial in on musky locations and use your boat, your trolling setup as a way to connect with more fish. So, when me and Jay are doing the Musky 360 podcast, we're always talking about seasonality. We're always talking about patterning. If you're not listening to that yet, tune in. We're sort of week by week, sort of dialing in on what's going on there. But trolling is a way to exploit what you know, right? You can either use it as a seek and destroy methodology where I don't know where the fish are, so I'm going to drive around haphazard. But dialed in trollers know if I know where the muskies are, I know where they're holding, I can take my boat, I control these baits, I can change speeds until I find the magic combination that's just continually putting fish in my net. So we need to be looking at, in general, breaks and break lines. And you go, well, what's a break? I hear this terminology all the time, break line. This is where the contours of the lake are breaking off into deeper areas. You know, we've had some serious structure podcasts on the 360 podcast. We've had some wonderful articles on there. You know, Joe Bucher talks about this. Pete Manus, Steve Herbeck, all the great guys just talk about understanding structure. And that's what we're getting at. What is a break line? A break is a contour change, a depth change in a body of water. We'll come into that littoral zone. Those shallow feeding zones where vegetation grows, where we spend most of our time, they're going to come out, flatten out, and they're going to break down at different angles into deeper depths. Understanding how to identify those on your map is a key. So we're going to look at a graphic real quick and sort of identify that first major break out of that littoral zone, that vegetated food shelf, that shallow zone. So here on the graphic, you'll see a flat that comes out, and you'll see that first big contour line, that big squiggle on your map. That's a break line. That first contour line is that first break as it comes into deeper water. Now, it might be very wide, it might be very thin, but that break is the first place of contact you can look for fish that are moving out of those shallows, say in a cold front or in different conditions that are moving in and out of those food shelves. As you come down and you'll see, and I've got it marked here as B on the map, that's where the other breaks come in, those secondary breaks, those tighter lines. Trollers that are dialed in are spending more time on those break lines where you see the steeper breaks, you see more contouring, you see more drop-offs, and basically when it boils down to looking at your map work, I always tell people when they're first getting going, look for the tight squiggles. Look for those areas where a lot of lines are coming together. Those are some of the most interesting places on the lake where lines are converging. So if you're looking for points, you're looking for humps, you're looking for anything that looks interesting, the more squiggles on the map, that's going to tell you that's where you need to be. So look on your lake, your body of water, wherever you're fishing. If you're getting into trolling, we're going to take our baits and we're going to try to mirror that break line, right? We're going to start by hugging it. Let's say that break line is at 12 feet. So we want to take, say, a depth rater like I showed you before. Here's just a jointed depth rater. It might be a headlock, it might be a depth rater. Let's take a jointed depth rater. And we're going to look at the Musky 360 app. We're going to see how many feet does it take to get this thing down? 8 feet, right? Start 4 feet above the break line, and you're going to troll, and you're going to try to hug that break line as tight as you can. So you're contouring that break the entire time, right? That's going to get you started. Now the ninja move, the next stage of that is swerving in and out across that break. So that bait is working in an erratic fashion. It's walking, it's wandering. Like I talked about with the headlocks. Having these baits move as we're coming across breaks, side to side, they're going in, they're going out, they're changing depth, is going to put fish in the net. But identify that first break out of that littoral zone and try trolling that. Now we move on to the next phase, which would be trolling those tight squiggles I was just talking about. These are the areas where things are dropping off dramatically. The tighter the lines on that map, that means that contour is a shelf, it is a break, it is a steeper area. Muskies will use that as they make their daily movements from the deep home water zone up to their shallow feeding zones. Throughout the course of the day, they're moving up, they're moving down. They're not always in the shallows. That's why trolling is so effective. So you're going to catch them in their movement, in their migration from the depths to the shallows in that course of that day, in the middle of the day, in the evening, wherever it might be. When they're making moves from deep water to shallow or shallow water to deep, you can contact those fish by effectively trolling. So you need to look at areas that are already holding muskies. Let's say we're starting out and we're fishing in the summer. We had a nice bunch of follows, or maybe we hooked up in the morning, but the muskies disappeared. They followed the contours, the structure of that lake, slightly deeper in the middle of the day, and they're going to come back up. But this is going to allow you to be more effective on those days where the muskies are making moves, or maybe we're in a cold front. So your serious trollers know that cold fronts are the time to troll. You need to find the contours and the structure. So if you look at that map and want to notate a hump, here's a saddle, and here's a point, right? Those in conjunction with the tight break lines on any body of water are going to be the place that predators use to target bait fish. Muskies are always near the refrigerator. You need to put baits near them, and trolling is the best way to do that when conditions are tough.
Like and subscribe, my dudes.
Downsizing in bad condition. Gonna put